friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be going through all of the books that I read in 2017 and kind of giving them a really quick little review almost. I did the Goodreads challenge in 2017. I said that I was going to read 52 books, which is one for every week in the year. I did pull it off, but only like very technically. So I started off really strong in like January and February, and then I basically just stopped reading until like November, in which I read like the last like 40 books I had left in like the last 3 months of the year. But yeah, technically I did finish it. I did read all 52. I became very determined near the end, and that's the only way that I was able to do it. But yeah, so I'm just gonna go through each of them really quickly. A lot of them are rereads. A lot of them are like really popular books that I don't think you guys really need my opinions on, like Harry Potter. I think we know how I feel about Harry Potter. But yeah, let's get started. So the first book that I read in 2017 was actually Buffering, which is the book that Hannah Hart, the YouTuber, wrote. It's kind of a memoir, kind of a, I don't really remember it that well, I can't find it, but she shared a lot of stories. It's called The Unshared Tales of a Life Fully Loaded. So it's a lot of like personal stories, like from when she was a kid, and she talks a lot about her mom, who has schizophrenia, I believe, and she just talks a lot about her personal experiences and kind of like why she is the way that she is. And I remember enjoying it a lot. It was really good, very, very personal. Okay, now we're gonna go into a bunch of Nancy Drew books that I read in a row. So first I read, apparently I'm going off my Goodreads list, by the way. So first I read Nancy's Mysterious Letter. So she actually receives a letter that is for a different Nancy Drew who's actually an heiress. And so she tries to find the real heiress to give her the letter because it's not hers, and Nancy's just a good person like that. And ends up with some bad guy trying to stop her from finding the heiress and to steal the fortune for himself, because of course. These are one of the ones where I'm not going to give the most opinion ever. I love Nancy Drew so much. I love all the books. They're all really good and easy reads. Like, they're not, you know, they're pretty short. They're not the most complex mysteries ever, but I always find them very interesting. Next I read The Sign of the Twisted Candles. In this one, she's asked by her cousins to investigate their great uncle, who is, they haven't seen in a long time, and they think he's being held prisoner in his own mansion. And so yeah, she investigates the weird goings on within within Bess and George's family. Then I read The Clue of the Dancing Puppet. In this one, she's asked to investigate a, you guessed it, dancing puppet. They think it's just a ghostly figure on their property. It shows up every night. She investigates it, finds it's a puppet, and other such things. Probably has something to do with like embezzling or stealing or something like that in the end. Then I read The Book of Awesome, which is basically just a huge list of awesome things. So like, when the vending machine gives you 2 things instead of 1, and the thank you wave when you let somebody merge in front of you. It's not like, I struggle calling this a book, actually. Like, I mean, it's hardcover, it's got lots of pages and stuff like that, but it's literally just a list. Like, it's just a really long list of awesome things. So it's a bit heartwarming, but if you're looking for like a read, it's not here. Then we begin the trip down Harry Potter lane. So first start with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I have read this book probably 50 times, like easily 50 times. So I know this book back to front basically. Great book. It's definitely a child's book. Like having going back and reading them all back to back again, especially out loud, you can really see how much the books grow with you as you read them. So like this one's definitely a child's book, and then they get more and more mature as they go on. Then we took a break and I read more Nancy Drew. So Mystery of the Moss-Covered Mansion. So this one, one of Mr. Drew's friends has been caught trying to deliver a truck full of explosive oranges to a NASA center. But they don't believe that it was his fault. They believe that someone planted them. So she goes and investigates and finds out what's really going on. And while in the area, discovers this moss-covered mansion, which is involved in the mystery. Great read. I'll never not suggest Nancy Drew. Like, it's such an easy, quick read. Like, that's why I read so much of them at the beginning of the year, because I knew I could knock them out in like a couple days. Although most of them aren't actually rereads. Some of them are, but a lot of them I got new. Well, not new, I got them from a used bookstore, but like new to my life. Then we go back to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the Secrets of Chambers. Great book. I don't remember it being as thrilling as I found it this time I was reading it. Maybe that's because I was reading it out loud and I had to kind of put more emphasis in the intense bits, but yeah. Love it. Next I read Americans in Space, which I cannot find. That's a book about a woman whose husband had passed away, and she's basically just trying to live her life as best she can. She's like a counselor at a high school where her daughter goes, and you know, there's lots of drama. I found it to be a really, really sad book with no satisfying ending. Like normally if like you go through a really sad book where like sad things continue to happen to your favorite characters, at the end there's like some sort of like it was worth it the whole time kind of thing. There's nothing like that in this book. It just made me sad. Then we return to Nancy Drew with The Clue of the Broken Locket. So this one is one where Nancy Drew goes to visit a friend of hers at a cottage, and that friend of her has a mystery for her. Two mysteries actually. One of them has to do with her boyfriend, who is a musician who thinks that his company is stealing his royalty payments, and the other one has to do with an old family treasure that she thinks is hidden somewhere in the cottage. So yeah, pretty classic, secret passageways, stuff like that, really good stuff. Next is Password to Larkspur Lane. This one's really good actually. This one is like a lot better than some of the other ones. So what happens is she finds a mysterious message on a injured homing pigeon, and then afterwards she gets sucked into another mystery with her friends whose grandparents keep seeing these weird symbols that like light up their yard at night, and so it turns out that they're connected, and there's like this old woman who's been taken hostage in this cottage, and she has to go and try and take down the criminals that are holding her hostage. There's a lot of secret agents and secret messages, and it's a really good one. Then we continue on Harry Potter with Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This is like a lot of people's favorite Harry Potter book. I don't think it's mine. It's up there for sure. I really like it, but I don't know. It's just not my favorite. It's good. It's great. It's just not my favorite. So next we have the Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which took me a long time to read, like several months. But yeah, another great one. Not my favorite either, but it's always fun to read about the Triwizard Tournament. Reading those parts out loud was a lot of fun. Like reading the dragon fight was really fun to read. But yeah, this took so long. It's so good. Then I read The Birth House, which is actually a really good book. It's about this young woman who lives in Nova Scotia, and it's right before this World War I. And she finds herself drawn to a midwife who helps women with their health problems, like giving birth and becoming pregnant, with home remedies and herbs and stuff like that. She's Acadian, so it's traditional Acadian healing. And so she becomes an apprentice to this woman, and basically they face a lot of backlash from the company, from the city, because there's this new doctor in town who's trying to bring really cold, hard, modern medicine into the world, and doing things like knocking women completely unconscious for their birth and all these things, and they have to basically they try at first to kind of reach out and work, you know, together, but then that doesn't work, so they end up having to like work against him from stealing her patients, and yeah, it's a really, really, really good book. Then I read The Pact by Jodi Picoult. I really didn't like this book. It was about these two teenagers who lived next to each other their whole lives. They were best friends their whole lives, and then they started dating, and then suddenly one day they find them both laying on a carousel at an abandoned theme park, and the girl has been shot in the face and is dead, and the boy can't remember how they got there. So it's a lot about the court case of him testifying and like figuring out whether he did it or what happened. I didn't like it. I really didn't like the ending. I didn't like how either of the characters, of the two teenagers, kind of like handled their lives, because it goes back and forth. I really dislike the main character, Chris, I believe his name is. I really don't like him. Yeah, I just found it to be a really disappointing book, which is kind of sad because Jodi's books are normally really good. Jodi, my good friend Jodi. Then I read The Little Dragons, which is a book I got for free off of the iBook store. This book is really long, and it was really, really, really good. up until a certain point. So the book is about a world in which dragons are real, and years ago there used to be peace between humans and dragons through these people called the dragon priestesses, and they were able to communicate with the dragons, and so they lived with the dragons and like had a ranch of cattle to feed to the dragons so they wouldn't eat the humans, and then there was peace. And then a new army of king's men came in and were threatened by the dragons, so they decided to, instead of, you know, continuing this peace and like taming the dragons, to just try to kill them all. And they also killed all the dragon priestesses because they assumed that they were like an ally and they would fight against them, which is probably true. And they also destroyed all the dragon priestesses' knowledge. So now they live in a world where they have to do everything by night, because during the day is when the dragons hunt and they might get caught by them, and there's no peace between them. They're free range meals for the dragons. And then there's like a bunch of characters. There's also like there's a healer school where some of the main characters are healers, and they are trying to figure out, one of them is really determined to find the old priestess's knowledge, convinced that it exists somewhere. And it's really, really, really good, except for, spoiler alert, near the end, you find out that the reason that the dragon priestesses could communicate with dragons is because they were having sex with the dragons and giving birth to these little dragons, and they could talk to the little dragons who could talk to the big dragons. Yeah, so, spoiler alert, bestiality, and trigger warning, bestiality. So that was and that's the thing is, like, it was such a long book. It was like 1,000 pages, and I was at like page like 900 before the freaking weirdness started happening. So I feel a little betrayed because it was such a good story up until that point, but there you go. Now you know, because I was not warned. The worst part was there was a trigger warning at the beginning of the book that said that there was going to be homosexual relationships in the book, and so if you don't like that sort of thing, don't read the book. But there's no warning about the dragon sex. Like, what? Anyways, then I read The Secret Garden, which is just a classic. Again, I got it free off the iBookstore, so why not? It's a really cute book. I like the character development of the little girl as she learns to not be such a prat, basically. Yeah, it's just like a charming little story. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Then I read a book called The Alpha Plague by Michael Robertson. This is another freebie off the iBookstore. As you can tell, I kind of have a theme going on. It is about a zombie apocalypse that is started by basically, I think it's the government has been researching this virus, and they were going to release it on like the enemy in this big world war that was going on, but then it accidentally got loose in the city and like started this crazy zombie outbreak. So yeah, I read that. It was pretty good, actually, like, all things considered. It wasn't like the best book ever in the world, but it was really good. And then after that I read The Alpha Plague 2, which again was pretty good. Not the best thing in the world, and I stopped reading the series after that. So take that as you may. Then I read a book called Holding by Graham Norton, and that one was a really interesting one. It's about like a small town in, I think, Ireland or something? Irish village. In which there's basically, it's one of those stories that has like a lot of characters, and it was, and it tries to like kind of wrap it all up into one story. It's a bit of a mystery, so I won't say much, but yeah, it's really good. Then I read Miles Morales by Jason Reynolds, which was fantastic, actually. I kind of read it almost as a joke because I saw that it was for free on the iBookstore, and I like Spider-Man and stuff, and it was a fantastic, fantastic novel. I thought it was really, really, really well written, especially for like a young adult novel. I highly recommend it. Then I read If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. This is actually a story about a trans girl who starts going to a new school where no one knows that she's trans. She's had both top and bottom surgery and been on hormones for a long time, so she's passing quite well. Like, it's not like she, you know, looks masculine still. So, basically she's living like this secret double life and doesn't want people to find out, and the normal kind of like high school drama happens. But yeah, it's a really interesting book. I found it really good. The author has like a whole big, kind of disclaimer at the back saying that, you know, she tried her best to tell this kind of like different type of story that you don't normally read about, and I think she did it justice. Then I read Freedom, My Book of Firsts, which is actually by J.C. Lee Duggard, who is the girl who was actually captured by a kidnapper and kept captive for 21 years? I don't remember, a lot of time, like a long time. She ended up having, I think, 2 daughters by him. She was kept in like this small backyards, like tent shanty town, and it was just really terrible. She also wrote another book called, I'm not sure what it was called, but it was about the actual captivity, as opposed to her, this book is more about the book of first, like the first time she did things again after being freed. So like the first time she went on vacation, or the first time she whatever. It's really good. It's pretty simply written. I don't think JC's much of an author, but it's a memoir, and it's interesting to get like a kind of a look into a life of someone who's had such a unique and traumatic life, like to see like what that person is how they're trying to live a normal life. And then I read Against Their Will, Sadistic Killers and Their Innocent Victims. That's a true crime story, a true crime book that has a bunch, it's basically an anthology of a different bunch of stories that are similar to JC's. It's not a great book. I don't recommend reading it. I got it from the library, I think. It doesn't have anything new. Like, I like reading stories about kidnap victims and stuff like that, just because I like hearing about them escaping at the end, and about what happens to the kidnappers and how the justice system kind of takes over. But so I know about a lot of these stories, and I was hoping that this book would have some more information than what like the wiki article has, but it doesn't, so it's not really worth it. Then I read One Kick, which is by Chelsea Kane. It's the first one of hers I read, and I read a lot more this year. I really like this book. It's about a girl named Kick, and she is this is probably why I found it. She is a kidnapper. She's a kidnapped victim who was set free, and she was kidnapped for 6 years, I think, by a pedophile who recorded child porn. And so she went through all that, and then this is her grown up, and now she ends up kind of working with the police and the FBI to try to track down the rest of the pedophile ring and try to like take them down, because she knows a lot of the inside information, but also involves her dealing with a lot of things that she's kind of tried to forget because it was horribly traumatic, obviously. But yeah, it was a really good book. The character is a really good character, strong female character. But yeah, I highly recommend it. And then continuing on the Chelsea Kane train, I read Heartsick, which is the beginning of one of her bigger series. It's about, I'm going to read the description of this one because I'm scared I'm going to spoil something. Damaged Portland detective Archie Sheridan spent 10 years tracking Gretchen Lowell, a beautiful serial killer, but in the end she was the one who caught him. 2 years ago, Gretchen kidnapped Archie and tortured him for 10 days, but instead of killing him, she mysteriously decided to let him go. She turned herself in, and now Gretchen has been locked away for the rest of her life, while Archie is in a prison of another kind, addicted to pain pills, unable to return to his old life, powerless to get those 10 horrific days off his mind. Okay, so yeah, basically, the story is about how this detective is trying to kind of get back to it. He's back on the force after being on leave because of that whole thing that happened. And then afterwards I read Sweetheart, which is the second book in that series, in which there's another case that's going on that Archie has to try to solve while still grappling with the fact that, with like kind of his history with Gretchen. Then I took a break from like the super serious thriller novels and read Geekerella by Ashley Poston, which was a cute book. It's about a girl who's a giant geek. She's a huge fan of a series that's similar to Star Wars, and her dad actually started a convention dedicated towards it. And so basically it's the story of Cinderella but with like a geeky modern vibe. The pumpkin carriage is actually the pumpkin food truck that she works in that's shaped like a huge pumpkin. So yeah, it was pretty cute. It wasn't, again, super groundbreaking or anything like that, but it was definitely a good read. Then we went back to Archie Sheridan and read Evil at Heart, which is the third book. I won't say anything about this plot because it'll give away what happens in the first two. But yeah. Same with The Night Season, which is the next book in the series. I think there's like 6 in the series or something like that. I'm not going to say anything about what happens in it because, again, it gives away the previous books. Then I read a book called Words on Bathroom Walls, which is about a young man who has schizophrenia, and he hears voices in his head, and he is on a experimental medication that's supposed to help him like kind of cope with that. So the story is told as a diary, a medical diary that he's writing as he's doing these experimental drugs, and he helps him a lot, and he mostly ends up talking about his actual life, and kind of what he's going through in high school. It's actually almost similar to If I Was Your Girl, which is a story that I talked about a second ago, which of the trans girl. It's kind of similar in the sense that they both have something with like about them that is extremely stigmatized by like normal culture, like mainstream is what I'm looking for, mainstream culture, and they feel like they have to hide it, and they're really afraid of their high school peers, because teenagers are mean, their high school peers finding out about it and what it'll do to their life. So yeah, it has a similar formula like that, but yeah, it's about a man with schizophrenia. Then we return back to the world of Gretchen and Archie with Kill You Twice. Again, no spoilers. Then I took another break and read Eleanor and Park, which was a very, very cute book about a young boy named Park and a young girl named Eleanor. They meet at high school, and they each have their own complicated at-home lives. Eleanor is extremely poor, living basically in poverty with a mother who is married an abusive jerkwad of a stepfather, and they have several siblings, and she's just trying to kind of keep things together, although it's really hard. It gets kind of dark, but it's also just like a really nice love story basically between two teenagers who are actually believable as teenagers. Like there's no grand sweeping romantic actions that take place because they're teenagers. They're not capable of that. They're just trying to care for each other. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Then we go back to Archie and Gretchen, I think for the last time, with Let Me Go. Not gonna say what it is again. And then we dip back to Nancy Drew for the last time of the year with The Ghost of Blackwood Hall. I think this is actually a reread for me. Pretty straightforward. They are investigating a place called Blackwood Hall, and there's supposedly a ghost there, but they find out the truth. Then I read It by Stephen King. Don't read that book. I did not like it at all. Not because it was scary or anything like that. I just really hated the ending. And if you read it before, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, Google it, because I'm not even going to talk about it. Then I started reading Chronicles of Narnia. I read The Magician's Nephew, Chronicles of Narnia, or like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So yeah, and I read Prince Caspian, and then I took a break to read John Green's newest novel, Turtles All the Way Down, which is a story about a young girl who has an anxiety disorder and OCD. She's really triggered by germs and disease, and she's constantly thinking that she has certain diseases that she kind of has an obsession with. If you have an anxiety disorder, I don't recommend it, simply because John Green does such a good job at writing a really good, really relatable character, and just describes anxiety so well that sometimes I would actually start feeling anxious as I was reading it, just because it was so relatable. But if you don't, or if you have a good control over your anxiety disorder, then I definitely recommend it, especially if you really don't understand anxiety because you don't have an anxiety disorder. It gives good insight into what it's like to live with one, and to know that your thoughts don't make sense, but to think them anyway, and to not really be able to control that. Then I went back and read A Horse and His Boy. I mean, I'm not really talking about the Chronicles of Narnia just because, like, they're good. I really like his writing. I find it, they're all really short despite having a lot of content. Like, he does a really good job at shortening down a lot of content into smaller doses. But yeah, I basically just read them pretty quickly, and they're classics, so what can I say? Then I read Ready Player One, actually, which is by Ernest Cline, and I loved it, honestly. Like, I didn't know how I would feel because a lot of my friends have read it and they suggested it to me with a lot of hype, and so I was scared that it was going to be overhyped and I wasn't going to like it, but I found it really good. I'm excited about the movie. I think it'll be interesting. I'm really happy about one of the casting choices. I thought it was really good. Then we're back to Narnia for The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and yeah, that one's probably one of my least favorite ones. Then we take a break from that and head over to another reread of the series. This one is called The House of Night novels. It's about a young girl so it's basically about a world very similar to ours, except for vampires are like a thing. Like, they're real people who exist, and everyone knows about them. It's not like Harry Potter where it's secret and separate. So there's these places called Houses of Night where you go, and it's basically the author calls it vampire finishing school. So it's basically where you go to learn about the history of vampires and like how to be a vampire and how to control your bloodlust and all that stuff. I read it in high school. It doesn't really stand up to time, honestly. Like, I remember finding it kind of flimsy when I was in high school, and now I'm realizing there's so many more things wrong with it. Like, one of the main characters is gay, and it's like every time he's in the scene, it's like constantly being brought up. It's like, it does that thing that a lot of straight people do when they're around someone who's like gay or queer in some way, and they just they feel like they need to bring it up all the time, that they're like super okay with it, and they're super, you know, liberal and okay with you being gay, like you do you, yeah, I'm okay with it. Anyways, they also use the word retarded like to mean like bad or stupid, which is super just, I mean, it shows its age, because that was more of a early 2000s thing that I think a lot of people are learning is not an acceptable thing to say. But all that put aside, I continue to reread it because, I mean, I already own the books. It's not like I'm giving her any more money. And went on to Betrayed. In this book, she's betrayed. Again, I don't really want to say much about it because I don't want to spoil the books, especially since like not a lot of things happen in the books. Like basically the first like 4 books could have been put into one book, but they're not for some reason. So yeah, it's just it's like a high school drama, but with vampires. Then I went back to Narnia to read The Silver Chair, which is the last one that I read this year from the Chronicles of Narnia. I hadn't read that one in a long time. I kind of forgot what it was about. I don't really like Eustace as a character, so I don't really like that one that much. But then we continued with The House of Night and read Chosen, which is the next one in the story. Again, could have been like one book this whole time, but it's an easy light read. It's kind of funny at times. It's easy to laugh at how ridiculously overdramatic every single character is. It's kind of a joke. Then I read Untamed, which is a book I have in physical copy, but I don't know where it is. It's just the next one in the House of Night series. Then we read Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix, which is actually something I lost a long time ago. So a lot of people don't like this one because they find that Harry is being overdramatic and like angsty. But I disagree with that. It's probably one of my more favorite books in the series, probably like number 2. And that's because especially in the books, like the movies really don't touch on it at all, but I understand what it's like to be taking people for granted, which is basically what Harry does a lot of the time with Ron and Hermione throughout this book. Like he just takes them for granted and yells at them like it's their fault, when really he's just mad at like the world at large. But he's been through a lot of stuff. And his friends are very patient with him, and they eventually do stand up for themselves when he gets too annoying, but I feel like his angst is all justified, and while it's not like the most fun thing to read ever, I think it all makes sense as a character, and it's like important to his character development. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents. Then I read a book called In a Dark Dark Wood by Ruth Ware, which was a really good book actually. I wasn't expecting it to be that good, but it was a really good book. It's a thriller book where a woman gets an email basically being invited to a hen weekend, which is like a bachelorette weekend, from a girl she knew in high school who she doesn't talk to anymore, and it's someone who she was best friends with but like grew apart from very suddenly, and then they go away to this hen weekend at a cottage, and next thing she knows, she's waking up at the hospital and she can't remember what happened, and she just knows that something terrible has happened, and it's basically like unraveling what happened that weekend throughout the different perspectives. It was really good. Really, I didn't expect the ending. It was a good ending and really good, just a good plot. It was just a good plot. Like, it's really hard to find like a good plot like that. Like, you never really understood, and there's a lot of characters, so you never really like knew who to look at. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then I read Adult Lessons by Gabby Hanna, which is a poetry book that she wrote last year, and it was pretty good. It wasn't quite, I don't think poetry books are really actually my thing. Like, I wanted to read it because I like Gabby, and I was following her while she was writing it, and it seemed interesting, but it just like isn't something I want to sit down and read for like an hour, which is what I ended up doing. Like, I just read it straight. I think poetry books are something that like you leave on a coffee table and like every once in a while read 1 or 2. I think it wasn't quite enough to like fulfill a reading session. Then I read Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince as my final book of 2017, and I love that book. It is probably one of my favorite books in the series. It's really funny to me because in this story they go back and forth between the most important and closest they've gotten to defeating Voldemort and like figuring out his past and learning his memories and stuff like that, spending time with Dumbledore, and like the weakest, most pathetic plots of like teenage romance and Ron and Hermione like starting to develop feelings for each other but just being like rude to each other instead of admitting to it, and like the whole lavender 1-1 thing, and like it's just, I find it really funny, like the 2 things. So I think that's probably my favorite in the series just because I find it really funny, and I like the look into Voldemort's past that we get. So yeah, there's my hopefully kind of quick, probably not as quick as I hope it's going to be, summary, wrap up, whatever, of all the books that I read in 2017. I am super excited to start reading again in 2018. I'm going to not put off my Goodreads challenge until like the end of the year. I'm going to start and continue reading throughout the year. Hopefully a lot more new books instead of panicfully rereading books I've already read. So if you have any book suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. I would love them. I'm really looking for more books outside of my comfort zone. And it's kind of hard to find good, reliable books that you know you're going to enjoy just by browsing on the library. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Later days.